Everybody does stuff. Yeah. Processing. Is this where? Yeah. And you know what, buddy? You're not actually both. Well, I am, just give anybody a little time to not show up, but do the walk on you. If, none of you guys have any objections, I'm gonna meeting order and leave us in the invocation and I'll ask the chief to lead us in the pledge and from there. Stand, please. That's right. Most gracious, loving Heavenly Father, again, Lord, we come to you as humbly as we know how. Lord, we just lift up your holy name and praise your holy name for all that you do for us. Every blessing of life you bestow upon us, the health, the strength that you give us to be able to go about our daily business, to go about the chores that we may have in our lives. Now, Lord, on behalf of the town board, I pray that you would bless us and help us as we come together to make the decisions for our citizens that we might do it in a pleasing manner to them, to us, and more especially to you. Be with us now through the rest of the meeting. Forgive us when we fail thee. We thank you, Lord, for your Son that died on the cross for our sins. We pray this prayer in Christ Jesus' holy name. Amen. Please face the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Please be seated and we'll get right on into the agenda. See if we can't get it wrapped up. Okay. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? No.
Mayor, just the one, the award and recognition swearing in our new police officer.
All right. Let's see. Let's approve the agenda. I need a motion to approve the agenda state.
I make a motion, the mayor to approve the agenda as stated.
Second. A motion and a second. Any questions or comments? There being none, all those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign, none opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. Let's see here. Next item on the agenda is awards and recognition, and we have a new police officer to be sworn in. That's great news. You have a family member who'd like to hold it?
Family home.
For my son to sleep, so.
That'd be fine.
Mom to do it?
You want your mother to do it? Hold it.
Sure.
Come on up, Mom.
Yeah, that'd
I'll stand back here.
be good. Yeah, come on up here, Mom. You hold the Bible, place your left hand on the Bible, raise your right and repeat after me, please. I, Jacob Andrew Golden,
I, Jacob Andrew Golden,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and maintain the Constitution
that I will support and maintain the Constitution
and laws of the United States
and the laws of the United States
and the Constitution and laws
and the Constitution and laws
of North
of
Carolina,
North Carolina,
not inconsistent therewith,
not inconsistent therewith,
that I will be alert and vigilant
that I will be alert and vigilant
to enforce the criminal laws of this state,
to enforce the criminal laws of this state,
that I will not be influenced in any matter
that I will not be influenced in any manner
on account of personal bias
on account of personal bias
or prejudice,
or prejudice,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
and that I will faithfully and impartially
execute the duties of my office
execute the duties of my office
as a police officer
as a police officer
with the North Wilkesboro Police
with
Department,
the North Wilkesboro Police Department,
according to the best of my skills,
according to the best of my skills,
abilities,
abilities,
and judgment.
and judgment.
So help me God.
So help me God.
I now therefore. Okay. Sign right here. There, he's got one of them signatures.
There you go. All right.
Are you okay?
Welcome to North Wilkesboro PD.
Okay. Item number 7. Public comment. Anyone? Item number 8. Consent. 3, A, B, and C. Can you do all of them? approval of minutes, budget, and name business center. All three.
Okay, Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as it is presented.
Motion and a second. Is there any questions or comments or any other discussion? There being none, motion carries. Thank you very much. Let's stand for town manager. I think you've got some things that.
Yes, sir. I've got two quick things and one longer thing. The first is you're probably wondering about the activity at the corner of D Street and Independence. And I've got some information on that I'd like to share. They've broken ground on the construction of a new Bethany Medical office building. It'll be 2 stories. It'll be approximately 16,600 square feet, half on top, half on the bottom. The Bethany Medical Clinic will relocate from their current location to the top floor of this new building. And the bottom floor will be mercantile space. The entrances to the mercantile space will be on the east side of the building, which is facing Independence. The main front of the building will address D Street. The parking lot will be behind the building, accessible off Independence Avenue. And there will be a carriageway or a portico for folks to drop off the patients that are going to the medical clinic. They've received their zoning and their building permits. But we don't know when construction is going to begin in earnest. The work they're doing out there now is just site prep. So you can see they've staked out the footprint of the building and they've started turning dirt to lay down the utilities and so forth that they're required to do. But that's what that activity is, if you're curious. The second thing I want to report is applications are now being accepted for the Downtown Partnerships Small Business Micro Grant. If you'll remember, this is the grant that's funded by Duke Energy. It's for businesses that are in or immediately adjacent to our downtown. And it's essentially to help businesses recover and pivot from the pandemic. So it'll fund traditional things that downtown grants do, but it'll also fund things like getting into e-commerce, which took off during the pandemic. So if you know of a business that you think might be interested, have them contact Crystal and she can share what the eligibility requirements and application requirements are with them. At the same time, the Wilkes EDC is also accepting applications for their entrepreneurship grant, which they do, I think, twice a year now. And of course, every business in the county is eligible for that. That's not just our town, but 2 good opportunities for small businesses to get a little funding going on right now. So if you know any that are interested, encourage them to apply.
Is there a time limit with the one for small businesses?
I think it's next month.
I
So I
thought
think
there
they've got
was.
about a month.
So
to
we
apply.
really need to be starting to promote this to folks because that time will run out so fast.
Yeah. We'll push it out there. Okay, any more questions or comments on that? My next report is just an introduction to a matter that Danny and I need to talk more about, but it might be back on the agenda next week. And so I just wanted to give you a little introduction to it now so that you wouldn't be surprised. Over the last few years in the General Assembly, there's been a movement to what I call decriminalize local ordinances. So essentially to take away municipalities' power to enforce their codes criminally. And most of the time, that's not a big deal because the things we really want to be enforced criminally have a corresponding state law that makes them criminal. But there are a few things here and there where there is no corresponding state law, and the municipal code is what makes that a criminal offense. And this movement in the General Assembly was to take away municipalities' authority to do that. The first iteration of the legislation just took that away carte blanche. But after some negotiation with the North Carolina League of Municipalities and other municipal advocacy groups, the final legislation was a compromise. And it prohibited municipalities from making certain offenses criminal, and it gave them the opportunity to keep others as criminal offenses if those municipalities took action. And so the areas that were no longer allowed to enforce things criminally are planning and regulation of development, stream clearing programs, regulating businesses and trades, outdoor advertising, solar collectors, cisterns, rain barrels, taxis, setback lines, curb cutting regulations, and ordinances regulating trees. That's not really a big deal for us because we have very few codes that apply criminal offenses to those areas. But we do have a few codes that, after consultation with Chief Rankin and now Chief Thornburg, we'd like to keep as criminal. And so we need to take some action. What that action is, I'm not quite sure. That's why I need consultation from Danny. But I'm planning to bring this back to you at the next meeting. And your agenda package will contain a list of the codes that we'd like to keep, a rationale for keeping them, and hopefully some clarification on the action that we need to take to keep them that way. And then we'll ask you if you agree to take action on that next week. So I just wanted to introduce that to you and give you a heads up so that you wouldn't be surprised. The bill was only signed by the governor last month, and we have a December 1st deadline to get our information in. So it's happening very quickly, and it's kind of complicated, and so it's hard to know exactly what it is they want us to do, but we'll try to figure that out before we come back to it. Dan, did I get that about right?
Yes.
Okay. That's my report, Mr. Mayor.
Very much. All right, let's see. Policies, you need to go over that one with us.
Yes, sir. So I need to promote a few people here that are going to participate in this next conversation. Give them a moment. Let me find Mr. Porter's PowerPoint here. Okay, so we're joined today by Mr. Gary Porter from the North Carolina Capital Management Trust. They are our advisor on the investments that we make with some of our resources. And the reason why I asked him to come and present today is because investments are an important part of a comprehensive financial policy, which we've been going over for the last few months. And just to, as an aside, what I plan on doing is taking all the feedback that you've given me on all the different topics and coming up with a draft policy and bringing that back to you to comment on in the weeks to come. But if you remember our last session, when Sharon Edmondson was here, she said that financial policies need to be reviewed periodically to make sure that they are still applicable depending on the environment. We didn't have a fund balance policy before, but we did have an investment policy. It was created in 2017 when the hospital money came in, but the environment is a little bit different now than it was in 2017. And so I wanted Gary to come in and advise us on if there are any changes or amendments to that policy that we need to make in light of the current environment. So, Mr. Porter, I've got your PowerPoint up, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioners and Wilson, for having me. That down a little bit. I appreciate the opportunity, and just wanted to kind of run through a brief economic update that kind of ties in with what we're talking about on the investments. As most of you know, we had the shortest and then the quickest recovery on history in March of 2020 when we had the shutdown for the coronavirus. And in the presentation there, the unemployment rate was just released. We're back up, back down to 4.6%. You can see that we were up in April of 2020 to almost 15%. So we made a lot of headway in that. The jobs numbers came out Friday. We were up 531,000 positions last month. So that's good headway. And this will relate to what I'll be talking about with the Federal Reserve and interest rates. If you can just advance to that next slide. Mainly what I'm want to point out is in the yellow highlight that what we're looking at from a macro environment for the outlook is the vaccines do seem to be knocking down the virus fairly well. We've had a lot of activity in the economy. We're probably just about past the supply constraints, or at least the peak supply constraints that we're seeing. We hope to have that start to work off over the next year. It's going to be a gradual process, though. And then monetary and fiscal policy are still very stimulative. We know with fiscal policy, with the infrastructure bill that was just passed and all of the ARPA funds and the CARES Act over the last 2 years, that has really put a lot of money into the system. The monetary policy is very accommodative. The Fed is currently at zero interest rates on the very short-term Fed funds rate. So if you can go to that next one. The fiscal deficit is getting better. I saw that we had the amount of money that we've borrowed is up to about $4.5 trillion, but the debt service on individuals is lower than it was back in the 90s as a percentage of GDP. That's because the rates are down in the 90s. We were at 6 or 7%. Now we're down at 0. So that is really making a big difference. The right side of that column, the outlook, we're in good shape for 2022. We've got a lot of pent up savings. People got all of the stimulus checks. They couldn't spend it all because they couldn't go out. Now they're starting to open things up, and we're looking for that pent up demand. We're seeing it all across the state. And the Capital Management Trust has got about 850 clients, all municipals, counties, school boards, ABC boards. Anybody that has to report to the local government commission, you're probably eligible. You should see budget surpluses. One thing that was different about this recession is interest income is about the only thing that went down. Most of all of your revenues, the sales tax were up, property taxes stayed up, and housing is booming. You compare that to 2008 and 9, it was basically down across the board, and it really had a much bigger budgetary impact on communities back in that time frame. So we're in a lot better shape. So, yeah. This is just what I was alluding to earlier. Household net worth has gone up steadily, and the debt service and debt payments have really gone down. So consumers are in a good place. Wilson had asked a question about, how long do we expect this to go on? We expect the economy to continue to improve for a couple of years at least, unless we get some kind of really big shock to the economy that we can't predict. But going along as normal, we should be in pretty good shape. And North Carolina especially, we're having a lot of in-migration. And so that really helps out. You don't want to have the out-migration that a lot of the Rust Belt or the Northeastern states have had. So that's a bad spiral. Now, the rural areas of the state, it is kind of a two-pronged approach at the state. The municipalities, the big municipalities are doing really well. Big population areas, high density. And I grew up down east in Greenville, and a lot of those eastern counties east of I-95 are really in bad shape. They just cannot get industry or population growth. So it's kind of the haves and the have-nots, but in general, the state of North Carolina is doing very well. From a global perspective, if you go to that next slide, this is just a kind of showing where different countries are along the business cycle. China is further along, and they're actually in the late business cycle, and they potentially could go into a recession here in next year. The U.S. is what they call a mid-cycle business cycle. And so we're in still pretty good shape. We've got a lot of landing strip there in front of us that we should be able to continue to grow and keep the economy going in good shape. And then this last slide I wanted to bring up, the Federal Reserve has their response typically to recessions is to drive interest rates down. And what that does is it stimulates the economy. It makes borrowing cheaper. It's the opposite of the physical side, but the monetary side is they're doing all they can. And currently they're buying $120 billion a month of Treasury and agency securities. And they just announced last week that they're going to start tapering that down from 120 billion a month down to zero, and they hope to get that done by the middle of next year. And the reason that is stimulative for the economy, the buying program, is that extra demand puts pressure for interest rates to go lower. Now, if they're pulling some of that away, the next thing in the middle of the year, once they've gotten down to zero on the bond buying purchases, that sets up the stage for further rate increases. And as you can tell from June, they had a meeting in June of this year, and none of the governors thought that they would be raising rates in 2022, and only 2 rate increases in 2023. Their September meeting, that they were expected one rate increase in 2022 and 2 in 2023. And now the verbiage there, most economists do think that the Fed may increase short-term interest rates potentially 2 times next year. We've heard July and November, and then 3 or more times in 2023. So that kind of sets up some of the questions that Wilson had asked about how long are rates going to stay down, and what should you look at doing about it. We're at the beginning of an interest rate uptick cycle. Generally, it's thought of from a portfolio standpoint. When rates are starting to rise, you would prefer to invest shorter. And then when those securities mature, you can reinvest at higher rates. And when rates are starting to fall, the next time we go into that cycle, you should extend your maturity slightly and be able to lock in those rates for a longer period of time. Wilson, do you have any questions as far as, I know we had talked about the, one of your questions was on stagflation, and I think I kind of answered that earlier. Stagflation is basically just higher than normal inflation and declining GDP growth, but the economy looks like it's in pretty good shape. And the percentages, I think, of stagflation are fairly low. Let's see. Did you have any other questions on that?
My main question for you is, are there any changes to our policy that you'd recommend we consider in light of the fact that we do count on our investment income to help balance our budget, and the fact that a couple of our investments are scheduled to start maturing in 2023, and we want to know if we should reinvest them in something different than we did before, or whether you think that interest rates, it sounds like based on the slide we're looking at, that they might have recovered enough that we can just reinvest them in a similar type of thing that we've currently got. But I just wondered if you had any advice on those 2 questions.
Yeah, I I used to, from 1987 to 2003, manage Mecklenburg County's portfolio, and we used to see these cycles just regularly. I would say you're kind of at the cusp of an interest rate increase cycle. So when you did your investments for the hospital lease, that was 2017, interest rates were much higher. So you've been able to take advantage of that. And the way the portfolio was laddered is you've only got, I believe, one investment maturing in 2023. And I looked at that, I think it was about a 218 is the rate on that. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised that by that time in 2 years that, you know, the rates on the longer term securities have come up as well as the shorter term securities. So I think you're probably not going to run a big risk. Plus, that's the only one that you have maturing in 2023. The rest of them are scheduled out further. So they will continue to draw the interest rate that was set up when you purchased those back in 2017. I don't think your exposure to a big difference in investment earnings is that large considering where we are right now and where the Fed is predicting interest rates will go.
In the meantime, the $5 million that we have invested, well, formerly with you all, but now with Surrey Bank, at your advice, you said that we should shop around essentially. And for a moment, Surrey Bank had a better interest rate, but theirs has since fallen down to practically nothing as well. And so our earnings on the $5 million investments are very low. Any advice for what we should do in the meantime with those to try to keep the money flowing?
Generally, I would say if I had to predict, I would say 90 to 95% of our clients only invest in the trust or bank products. And it's just, you know, it's at one of those times where historically the rates are low. I would not extend out just chasing yield if you go out in a treasury or a U.S. agency. I wouldn't go out too far because in an upswing, what happens is when yields go up, bond prices go down. And Connie will know this. She's would have to, you have to make a fair value adjustment for your financial statements at the end of the fiscal year. And the last time we saw this cycle back in 2013, there was 30 or 40 units across the state that had negative investment earnings for the year just because rates were so low. And when the rates started to go up, the fair value adjustment was negative. So they had to book that to their, I would just be more, I would be conservative. There's nothing right now. If you feel like going into commercial paper and pick up a little bit, just make sure that it's the highest rated names, and always have your safekeeping agent take possession of those so you're protected in case of a broker default. But there is credit risk in commercial paper. What happened back in March of 2020, there was a dislocation in the market and prices dropped substantially on commercial paper. We had a couple of clients that said we need money and we need to sell our commercial paper, but they're only offering us 65 cents on the dollar. And we just said, take it out of the trust because, you know, it's 100% liquid. And, you know, they did end up holding, but now 2020 was a unusual situation, I will say, but that's the risk you run if you go into a non-liquid security like a commercial paper.
Okay. So the last question on the list that I sent you, number 9, we talked about the limit on the maturities, and you distinguish between the hospital funds and the general investment funds. But I'm curious to know whether you think that when the hospital funds mature, if we should reinvest those in things with sort of shorter securities as well.
And your lease runs for how long?
30 years.
So these securities look like they are laddered out to 2027. And what I would do is the closer you get to the maturity date in 2023, you can see what the market conditions look like. And if interest rates have recovered, you can always go out for another 5-year period or whenever you want to put out there for your cash flow to meet that cash flow. The only other thing I would say is hopefully interest rates have recovered, and I don't think you're running a big risk of exposure. And laddering is a good strategy because it kind of spreads out the risk of when something matures and when something needs to be reinvested. The only other suggestion I would make would be in your policy, you've got something in there that says investments can't be made longer than 15 years. That's a really long time for a municipality to have on their books. You may consider, since the hospital lease is so unique, separating those funds out in your policy and having a different maturity time frame for those funds, and having a shorter time frame for your general investment funds. Generally, I would say probably no more than 3 years or 5 years at the most for just your general investments. Until the recession of 2007 and 8, when interest earnings went down so much, boards and managers did not, and investment officers did not tend to go out much past 2 years. But everybody was struggling in that time frame to get investment earnings. And so they extended out. And you just open yourself up for more volatility the longer you go. And I believe it's GASB 40. I'd have to take a look, but you can segregate those funds within your policy and just say, you know, for hospital lease funds, we could have a longer maturity. All other investment funds, we would have a 3 to 5 year maximum time frame. And generally, local government investments are much shorter than that.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions or comments for Gary? Gary, when I draft our draft policy on this matter, can I send it to you for review?
Oh, yes, I'll be glad to. And we review quite a few policies. We work with the local government commission and the school of government on their cash and investment programs. So yeah, we'll be glad to help out any way we can. I think it is a good structure, the way you've structured it out, laddered it out. And that takes some of the potential variability of your cash flow stream out of harm's way, because you locked in at a good time back in 2017 when rates were higher. And just to let you know, in January and February of 2020, the trust was paying 2.5%. And, you know, we're down in the 0.01 now because of the way interest rates are. But as soon as the Fed starts moving their interest rates back up, we should follow that very quickly.
Connie, you have anything to add? She's probably shaking.
No, I just want to thank Gary for his time.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Gary. All right, anyone else?
Thank y'all.
Gordon, thanks so much.
And please give us a call if you need any other help.
Good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's nice to know that they're there.
Yeah.
We do.
They're a great service that is offered, and truly, you know, they're looking out for the interest of municipalities. And when we told them that we needed to pull our money from them, they said, do it, do what's in your interest. So we still have some invested with them. That's why we get their services, and that's why they're willing to advise us. But they have our best interest at heart. It's not just about getting our business.
I appreciate you taking your Soon, talk to us.
Anytime. Thank you. We've had a long relationship with North Wilkesboro, so
All right. There we go.
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. E, amendment to pay plan for public utilities, Director Wilson, that's you,
Yes, sir.
Brian Office.
Okay. So as a reminder, I'm recommending enhancing the job responsibilities of the Public Utilities Director position in an effort to position us to more effectively get through a series of capital projects that are on the horizon. This includes our water plant upgrade, which is still in progress, and any changes to the system that are currently underway compatibility study recommends that we need to make. I think we need someone with both a technical and an administrative background to get us through these things. And the administrative skills in particular aren't required in the position as currently constituted. And so I want to enhance that position and get someone with that background as well. And to find someone with that background, we need to be able to pay them competitively. And that's why I recommended that we amend our pay scale and boost the pay range for this newly constituted position. When I made this recommendation back a few months ago, you wanted me to come back with a plan on how to pay for it. And so that's what I've done. So I asked you to draw your attention to the document that looks like this. On the very last page of your agenda. And this is my proposal. So paying for the increased cost of the position in the current year won't be a big deal because Dale's been retired for long enough that the savings we've experienced by not having to pay him will make up the difference in salary for the current year. But it's subsequent years that we'll have to find the money. I have to confess that my recommendation is contingent on the state budget passing with the $500,000 earmark that the General Assembly's proposal contains. So Representative Elmore lobbied and got us the $500,000 that we were going to get in the last budget, but was taken out back to pay for a water project. And the state Office of Management budget has already reached out to us and asked how we'd like to spend that money if it comes to pass. And I told them that we'd like to start paying off the water tank project early. And if that happens, then the amount of money we have to borrow will be less, and we'll have approximately $28,000 less in principal and interest to pay on that project each year. And that's 85% of the extra cost of this position that we need to find. So I recommend that we, if that budget comes to pass, that we redirect the principal and interest savings on that project to paying for this expanded position. The rest of the money, approximately $4,700 in year one and $5,500 in year two. I project that we'll have savings in that department based on this new position's ability to do work that we currently contract out. So for example, we're using an outside firm to manage our grant and administration needs for the water tower project. We're paying an outside firm to help do the construction management on that project. Those are things that a person with a more administrative background will probably be able to handle for us. And so I think we'll be able to save some money in those areas and apply that savings to paying for the extra cost of this position. So that's my recommendation on how to pay for it. This other sheet also talks about the extra cost of the public works director position. And those are smaller, and I project that we'll be able to pay for those with salary savings each year. The public works crews have turnover and so forth. And so there's always a time during the year where a position or two is vacant, and we're just banking that money, when those positions are vacant. So over the last few years, they've come in under their budgeted salary figure each year. And I project that'll happen again for the next few years. And we can just redirect that money to the extra cost of paying for that position. So that's my recommendation. I hope that's sufficient enough information for you on this matter.
We need to vote on that.
Yes, sir. You would need to vote because it would be an amendment to the payment.
Wilson, what if, you know, because right now, anything in Raleigh is not necessarily guaranteed. So, you've got that 28,000, kind of high, you know, listed there. What happens if the state budget does not pass? And we don't get that $28,000 savings to our debt service? Where do we find that 20, if we approve this position and the budget, we don't get that, where do we get the money from?
Well, I need to come back to you, go back to the drawing board and bring you another recommendation. So if it's the pleasure of the board, you can make this approval contingent on the state budget passing. And I won't take any action until we know we got that money in there.
Wilson, is it still looking hopeful that a budget will pass this year?
So the budget negotiations have been taking place, I don't want to say behind closed doors, but not as publicly as they did last time. And it's because the governor and the General Assembly want to be able to work it out and not have all these other outside factors influencing the negotiation. You know, our money isn't what's holding the budget up. And so I think that whatever passes will probably have our earmarks in it. I don't know that for sure, but that's just the sense that I get.
So how readily are the how readily is the applicant pool for a position like this? I mean, is this something that as soon as we put the advertisement out there that we're looking for this position, that we're gonna have potentially good candidates to pull from? You know, because is this a position that is widely known as far as municipalities across the state? So I mean, are we gonna be able to find good applicants to do this, especially in this pay range?
I think so. You know, it's a competitive pay range. We compared it to peer municipalities. You know, all those firms that I've alluded to here tonight that are helping us with our other project, Kimley Horn, Withers Ravenel, Madison Craig, Evans went to work for. Anyone who works there could be a competitive candidate for these positions. And those folks, you know, probably would appreciate the stability of having a government job rather than working for a firm that doesn't provide that same stability. So, and working there gives them the skills that they would need to perform at this job. So, I think we could have a competitive applicant.
So are these people, would we be hiring an engineer?
Folks with an engineering background, we didn't require that they be a professional engineer. But I gotta say, you know, folks with a professional engineer designation would probably have a leg up in the recruitment process. But yeah, folks with that background are who we're looking for.
Considering projects we have coming up and the money that we spend with not the big engineer, but the other one that helps manage it or whatever, do you think that this could play out money wise?
Yes.
So Wilson, do you have an idea of what your potential timeframe is? Let's say the budget in Raleigh goes forth. You have an idea of when you would hope to have this position filled and operating?
I think I would need about 4 months from the time the budget is passed to have the position filled and operate.
And would the hiring for this position be at your sole discretion?
Yes, sir, but I'd come back to you all before we posted the job, I'd come back to you all with the job description, the candidate profile, and ask for your approval on that before we posted it.
Thank you.
And so if we hire somebody that has this more administrative background, what happens if you hire them, you still have to keep hiring engineers?
Well, we'll make it clear to them that we're looking for folks who can do that work instead of contracting it out. But if there's something really complicated that we do need to hire out, we'll be very thoughtful about that. And honestly, we'll just have to include that in our, you know, rate calculations going forward in the years to come to make sure that we can cover that.
I just want to make sure if we're going to spend extra money that they can do the things we do. I guess
That's a long list, It's a lot to do.
It certainly.
So it really needs to be someone who stands out in a very professional manner.
And just some history how we got to this place, why we don't have these two positions separated now. About 2007 or 8, I can't remember exactly. Lowe's had their home office on 268 West. And they did not tell the town what was happening. We knew it was going to happen, that they were likely to move, that they were gonna move, but we didn't know when. And just one day, we came in and we had lost a quarter of our tax base like that. And it's really never come back. And so we had to make changes that nobody wanted to make. And Dale stepped forward and volunteered to really do 2 jobs. And by doing that, he saved us a lot of money, but it took us off this route that we would have been working toward, because we used to have 2 positions. And so I've gotten anything wrong, and Connie also has been here through all this, but that's how we got to a point where now we're adding something that we used to have in a sense, and would have evolved to this sort of professionalism, but finances.
So with the water sewer fund and the projects we have coming up, like the lunch to tank, the aquaflow and stuff, you think we'll be able to afford this?
Yes, sir. It's not one of those things that, you're gonna see a tangible return on investment, but it'll make your projects go by quicker, more efficiently, and perhaps have a richer diversity of funding sources with this person out beating the bushes trying to find those dollars than we currently have.
It's much needed. I'm absolutely in support of it.
How much extra a year is it gonna cost compared to what we're paying now?
So that's on the sheet. It'll be about $33,000 a year more than we have budgeted. And that includes both the difference in salary and all the associated benefits and other costs that we have to pay for.
Insurance,
Yeah.
or
Social Security. It doesn't include vehicles, but it includes all the personnel related costs.
what's a car, maybe 3,000 a year?
Yeah, we'll find, we've got extras. We'll work that out.
So what do you need? Motion.
I can make a motion, Mayor, if you don't mind. I make a motion that we approve the amendment to the pay scale for the recruitment of the public utilities director, but it has to be contingent upon the budget passing with the earmark to our water system, water tower, so that we can afford it.
Okay. You heard the motion, do I have a second?
I'll second it, Mayor.
Any other questions or comments before we vote? There being none, all those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign, unopposed, motion carried. Before we go any further on the agenda, we'd like to make this announcement that Keith Martin's mother passed away. We need to keep him and family in prayer. She's been in bad health now for about a year. I think she did have COVID, and she kind of recouped from that, and she ended up with pneumonia. She's just been in and out of hospital, but she's passed away, and we need to keep our chief in our thoughts and prayers, and please do that, okay? Now, we'll move on to emerging issues. Any board members bring up topics not on the agenda for discussion or staff? Oh, you.
Is there any updates on the grant from the hospital foundation for the parks, and is there a timeline or deadline on that?
So we've got 2 proposals, but I'd like to get a third because I've heard that one of the firms that sent in a proposal is breaking up. And so their proposal might not be good. So we still got a little bit of work to do on that.
Can you give us an example kind of what they'll do?
They'll come in and they'll create a sort of proposal of the kind of upgrades that we can make to Smoot Park and about how much ballpark each of those upgrades would cost. And they'll create, nice colorful schematics of what the park, architectural drawings of what the park can look like with these kind of improvements. So at the end of their work, we'll have a nice booklet that shows what it can look like and approximately how much that vision will cost. And that's what we use to apply for these larger things.
Will that cover it or we have to pay more?
Well, it depends on how comprehensive you want it to be. For the money that we got in the smaller grant, it won't be like blueprints and architectural drawings. But it'll be enough that you can have a vision of what the park would look like when it's transformed, and general enough cost estimates that we could know how much we needed to apply for with the other grants. They're not going to bid out the construction of a gazebo or whatever they propose and give us the true market rate of what that costs, but they'll pull from their previous experience what kind of costs those projects run and share that information with.
And then we can use our funds, but also reach back out for grants from people for that.
Correct.
There's the Part F grant. I don't know if I said that right. You know what I'm talking about?
But it does require a match. So the other grants that we've got an eye on, they're all different. Some of them require no local money, some of them require 10%. They're all different. The Part F grants typically require I think I'm saying this right, I wish Meredith would get correct. I think they require a 50% match. So they only cover half the cost.
We've lost some good projects because we just could not afford the 50% match that was required for the
So the good news is if you get, for example, a charitable grant, you can stretch your dollars by using that for your match and maybe apply for more from the park.
Can we, or do you have a timeline on how long it's going to take to get that study initiated?
That's what I think without getting shown.
I mean, do you think it's going to take like a year or months?
Oh, no. It'll probably take 3 months. Once it's signed, once we choose one.
Wilson, if it's possible within the scope of what's going on, I would ask that you might consider something, and that is many acres of land that are on the Jenkins side. Think about where Burt's recycling, metal recycling is. Okay, that's, I guess you'd say the north side of that road. On the side closer to the river, there are many acres of land available that aren't useful for much except farming, but they would make a great park. And the reason I bring this up, years ago, there was a family that owned that land and they have since sold it. They were going to donate it to the town for parkland. And we actually had a class from A&T University come in, and they have a great landscape architecture program. And they did a plan for North Wilkesboro. It was the what's now the Downtown Partnership that had that done, and Crystal might have that plan available somewhere because it, of course, the family that was going to donate it had some requests and a style they wanted for this park. But the reason I'm saying this might be a time to have a vision for the future. Talk to these folks that are doing the Smoot Park and say, how realistic do you see this? Because I see Wilkesboro putting in a whole lot of parkland along the river. And maybe it's something we could all work together toward, and then we could enhance theirs and they could enhance ours. but it doesn't belong to us. And so maybe we need to pursue that. some way in the future.
Yes, ma'am.
If nobody has anything else, I would like to mention one other thing. Thursday is Veterans Day. Ceremony will be held on 9th and D. Of course, office is closed, but I am a veteran. I will not be able to make it. I have a funeral service I've got to attend in the States for one of my relatives. Father's side passed away, so I'd encourage all of you who can attend the Veterans Day ceremony, 11 a.m. on the 9th of D.
But we are definitely on for light at downtown in its normal capacity.
Yes, sir.
This is gonna be kind of, but we have the splash pad properly winterized so that we don't have freezing pipes and big mess.
I didn't ask Nelson that question this morning, but I presume the answer is yes. He mentioned that last week, that they were gonna do that and show them how to do it, so we could do it, so.
Testing.
I'll double check. Yeah, we'll do.
Just give us one more. Yes or
I understood.
We got one every
With the state budget, I mean, there's just, you have any, there's no way you can have any kind of idea if that passes, how long that might be. Is there?
I mean, it could be tomorrow, it could be another month. They've sent some of the ARP projects back to relevant committees in the General Assembly. But I actually think that's good for towns because it'll open up eligible projects for that.
Jeffrey said he has the money for the mural in there. That's what I'm asking.
Okay. I don't have anything. We don't need to go into closed session or anything.
I don't have anything to add to you. Not for this meeting, no.
All right. All I need now is a motion to adjourn. Unless anybody else says. Have a motion. Don't really need a second. All those in favor, give their